Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Stephen Gustafson, and I'm here from GE Global Research to present the next software webinar series on social media and collaboration. Hopefully everybody can hear me. There's some help information on the screen now if you're having trouble with the voice over IP. For questions and comments during the presentation, you can send those through the WebEx system to the host, which is Rebecca Norton, and not to myself because I can't see them right now. You can also send questions or comments through the Twitter hashtag of GE Software. And please do send questions because we'll address them. I'll try to answer as many as I can at the end. Okay, so we're good. Okay, so like I said, my name is Stephen Gustafson. I've been at the GE Global Research since 2006. Before that, I came from the University of Nottingham, where I worked in a operations research lab doing heuristic search and optimization. My dissertation research was in genetic programming, a type of evolutionary algorithm. And since I've been at the center, I've been very fortunate to work on some pretty exciting projects. Some of them using my dissertation work, some of them branching into work that I did as a undergraduate and master's student at Kansas State University. The reason I'm talking here today is from some work that I was really excited to do with NBC Universal, which kind of got me into working in the areas of marketing intelligence, text analysis, social network analysis, and visualization. We did quite a bit of things over the last couple years for that business, but also other businesses. And today's presentation is about some of the techniques and some of the research that we did in the application area. So just as I was fortunate enough to have some really cool projects to work on, I was also fortunate enough to have a great team to work with at the Research Center. And so a lot of what we'll see today is really a big team effort. Some of those people are here and some have moved on to other places, but I am thankful for having those great colleagues around me. So first, a little bit of background around the General Electric Company. It was founded in 1892. There are over 300,000 employees worldwide, and it's the only company in the Dow Jones Index that was originally listed in 1896 to still be there. The Global Research Center that I'm speaking to you from is in upstate New York, near Schenectady, which is the site of the first research center in 1900. It was one of the first, or the first, U.S. industrial lab. And we do some pretty cool things, I think, here and across a broad range of applications. We have 3,000 technologists at the Global Research Center. And those centers are in Niskayuna, New York, where I'm speaking today, India, China, Germany, and a new center opening in Brazil. So for today's talk on social media and collaboration, I have one sort of concrete main message that I want to explore today, and that is social media generates data that creates value through direct and indirect collaboration. And by that I mean, social media, we'll talk a little bit about what that is. Today you can basically think of it as almost any interaction you have through some digital format. Most of the web is now social media enabled. Most websites have the ability to send, share, comment. Those are all social media tools. Those tools enable direct collaboration through these digital formats. So indirect collaboration is enabled through that. Those direct collaborations, sending messages through Facebook, commenting on pages, those create a just extremely valuable and interesting trail of data from who is doing what to the actual content of information. And being a machine learning person and working in a machine learning lab here at the Research Center, I'm of course very focused on understanding how we can leverage data coming from social places as well as industrial equipment, from marketing information to see how we can improve our understanding of the world and of people, behavior, and devices. So So the talk is organized into 3 sections: an introduction on social media, an introduction to what kind of data is generated and how that's generated, and then lastly, talking about how that data creates value. And so we'll look at several examples, some things that we've done here and things that have been done in other places. So first, social media. So here's the Wikipedia definition. It's a little silly, I feel, to be introducing this, since I'm sure that most people have a pretty good grasp on what social media is by now. You can hardly turn your head on the internet without running into some kind of sharing device, either by posting it to Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, tons of others. But the point is, that pretty much most of our communications and media on the internet are socially enabled. And we should think about this as that it's to the point where it's really just, extending our ability to communicate with individuals into this digital platform in a much easier and seamless way. So all the things that we do in our social space, being human, so talking to people, giving recommendations, giving people advice, that is now being carried out in so many new, different, and exciting digital formats. And I would be, not keeping up with typical social media talks if I didn't bombard you with statistics, and I won't actually go into these. But here's 3 links that have some interesting information if you're curious. You can Google the social media revolution video to find it on YouTube, and that has a lot of interesting things. There's a couple other links here that you can also Google those titles. And you can just see from some of the numbers around there, it's pretty sure that we're not going to see some form of these types of platforms, becoming just more and more dominant on the web, and more of our interaction on the internet will probably take place through these very heavily social enabled platforms. So I thought, instead of going through some of the statistics and boring people about those huge numbers that's sometimes hard to understand, what I do instead is to leverage social media to help us define in some different ways what social media is to different people. So I went on to Twitter, and this is something that is kind of fun to do with all kinds of questions that you have. Form a question, put it in quotes, and submit it on Google or Twitter or some other location, and see what kind of answers you get. So here's somebody saying, social media is one way we interact with you, answer your questions. Social media is about people, it's not about business. We need to learn how to work in the current economic climate, so we need to embrace social media. Social media is a garden, it needs to be constantly watered and nurtured. I think this is a great one, because just like your social interactions that you have with your friends and family, everybody, I'm sure, is aware that as you left school, college, you once had these great, amazing friends there, and it's very difficult to keep those friendships in as a good a condition as it was when you're in school. And in social media is the same way. It's not enough to just to follow people, to friend people. Those interactions really mean nothing unless you constantly maintain them over time. I think this is a really fascinating one because it talks about how data is key in this space. So somebody posted, I didn't tell anyone where I was going, so social media is my safety net. I parked at some trailhead, and I'll run south for 2 hours and turn around. So when you think about the importance of IT and platforms and management of data, I mean, this is like something out of like a CSI show. Somebody goes missing, and the only thing that's able to find them is their post on Twitter, post on Facebook. This is how important social media has become to some people, and how important it is to understand how people are interacting with it. And engaged citizenry is more important than who's in power. Social media is just a tool, it's not the answer. I think this one is really a good one to conclude on because of all the kind of things happening politically in the world and people talking about different types of revolutions being driven by social media. I think it's important to remember that these are tools, and what we're interested in that's such a powerful thing is that they create data that we can use to understand how people behave, what they want, and their interests. But it really takes people who are going to maintain these tools and use them and commit to them to make them the powerful thing that they can be. So I thought this would be kind of something fun not to try to maximally confuse everybody, but to just show that this landscape is pretty amazing. Right now there's such a growth of different social media tools out there. And there are tools that do similar things. They do it in different user interfaces. They have very different business models. But what I'd really like to focus on is the things that are on the outside of this landscape. So the orange words, and I'm going to go from the top, the web applications, aggregation, recombination, recommendation filtering, collaborative filtering, social networks, rating and tagging, content sharing, and widgets and components. So a lot of those things, like recommendation and filtering, that means people directly saying, hey, you should go read this. But it also means when you go to a site like Netflix or Amazon and they say, hey, you bought this, you should also check something else out. Those things are being driven through other people's actions, through their connections with you, through their profiles and your profiles. And those are what I would call these indirect collaborations. So by participating in these tools, you're making the tools smarter. You're giving the people who run those tools extremely valuable data, and they can in turn offer better services to their customers. And this is what it means to be engaged. You engage in these tools, you make them better, you get more feedback. And that's, I think, something that's extremely important about the social media landscape is that it requires participation. You participate, you get feedback from the things they offer you, but then you also give data and help them improve tools. And so to kind of give a different perspective, I was looking at all these different places that we find social media, and I thought this was interesting. So on this website, ebennett.org, he tracks how many hospitals are socially enabled. And I found on another site from the AHA.org, there's about 5,700 registered hospitals in the U.S. And so they have a count of about 1,188 hospitals in total have social media is part of their offering. There's people on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Foursquare. I thought was interesting at first. Foursquare is a check-in service, and that seemed kind of strange, but then it makes a lot of sense. People telling people that they're at the hospital, they're doing a test, they're meeting with their doctor. There's a lot of hospital social networking sites, and so I think probably we'd be hard pressed to find an area in today's society that is not somehow socially enabled. Okay, so moving on to data, and here we're going to talk about networks and some of the considerations that social media data presents. So just as a introduction to data and how I think about collaboration and social media. So on the top left, we have what I'd call the traditional human solution. And so somebody is searching for a job, and they meet with their neighbor, their friend, somebody, and they ask them, hey, can you give me a job? Do you know of something? And the person replies, yeah, I know somebody. Go talk to this person or go to that company. I think I can help you out. Social media enables that solution to happen, but in a much bigger space. Say you wanted to work at GE, you go onto your Facebook, LinkedIn accounts, you find somebody that you know from your past, maybe they're close, maybe they're not too close, you see that they work there and they work at a place that you want to be, and then you can just ask them, directly and see if they can help you. So now your sort of sphere of social interactions has just grown tremendously. There still is, and we'll talk about it later, the need to understand how strong relationships are and to manage those. But that's social media is enabling these conversations to happen in a very different way. And those create really valuable data. So the collaborative solution to something like this is that you're just on the internet searching around. Maybe you're on your LinkedIn profile site or you're searching on Google, and something automatically pops up and says, hey, you might be interested in these jobs, maybe based on what you searched, based on what people in your LinkedIn profile have done, or maybe just based on what people in your industry are doing. They can try to understand that you might also be interested in this stuff. And that's pretty powerful. And that comes from this data that is being produced when people use social media tools. Another example is around movies. I think most people know Netflix, and a lot of people who work in computer science, especially in machine learning and data mining, are aware of the Netflix challenge where they challenged the world to come up with new algorithms and gave a pretty substantial prize if you could improve on their performance. So the traditional space in movies or in other kinds of products is that you ask your friend to see a film, they say, hey, I want to see this, I heard it was good. So you get a direct word of mouth, this is a good film that we should see. Social media, of course, makes this question much more easy to ask. You can just ask out on the internet, somebody's seen this, you can go to a blog and get tons of reviews, you can comment on things. And so you can get very immediate recommendations about what you should buy or what you should see. And this again creates just amazing data. So if you are on Netflix and you're renting films, Netflix, Amazon, they can tell you, people, the sphere of options that you have. Sometimes people call this delivering the long tail. It depends a lot on the business models that these companies have, and in some sense, collaboration, indirect collaborative solutions is not really an option for some companies. It's not, and they have to generate this data, they have to get people to use it, and then they have to find smart ways to leverage that data to be successful. So far we talked about social media creates relationships. And so there's a direct relationship, like two people tweeting each other, and then there's an indirect relationship saying, hey, this blue person tweeted this gray person. And that data is what we're talking about. But how do we use that for collaborative solutions? So I'm going to go into just a very basic networks example. And this is just a very silly toy example kind of to demonstrate the point. So we think of cities. So we have 3 cities. Cities can be connected by electrical grids. They can be connected by roads, and they can be connected by something more indirect, like the immigration of people from one way to the city. These are all different ways that we could connect cities through these relationships. And so who would collect that? So civil engineers, politicians, and other people. Let's look at the social network. So we have people in a social network. They could be family members, so talking about like a real social network, not Facebook or Google+, but a real traditional social network. They could be your friends, or they could be people you share information with. Then we can look at this in terms of Facebook, and we can say it's exactly the same thing. You have people, they know each other as family or as being married. They can share information by sending messages through Facebook, and they can friend each other. And so who collects this data? In the real and in the digital space, sociologists who study human behavior and how people interact, as well as the social network companies. So this data, you can start to see who owns the data is becoming very important also. So product networks. So movies, example, movies can be related by who shares actors. They can be related by genres and about how they're watched together. So these are all kinds of different interactions, different relationships that you can draw between movies, products, places, and people. And then the content network. So now this is maybe a little bit more traditional when we think about web pages and hyperlinks, people linking from one page to another. Web pages and content can also be related by their similarity in the types of things they post, and it can be related by how people visit. So website owners and people who manage websites, especially large ones, have very powerful information that they can use to drive you into e-commerce activities, to help you find products to buy, help you find products to buy that were more expensive than you originally wanted to spend. So lots of good opportunities. Person who does something like checks in to a city or some location, a restaurant, we think about them tweeting some other person and about that person buying a book about a city. Now we're collecting a really diverse set of information. It's difficult maybe to think about how we combine that, but the opportunities to learn from that information and make predictions about, is somebody going to go visit a city now? Are they going to be going to a location that's near the place they just checked in? Can we infer something about what they're doing since they checked in a location? You can really make some powerful predictions and understanding about what people are doing, and the question then becomes, who can get access to this network? Who can collect it, who can manage it, and who can leverage it for doing something useful? So I'm now going to make a little bit of a digression into search applications. So we've worked, when we think about social media, something I think very exciting is happening there. So the search graph, so if people are familiar with Google and other search engines, there's a concept of how web pages basically vote on other pages, and the algorithm is called PageRank, and I'm making it extremely simple here, is that when you have these web pages and they make hyperlinks, so a link from one page to another, those links, we can think of them as some kind of voting. The person who wrote that link is essentially saying, the site that I'm linking to, I think it's interesting one you should look at. And so when you do a search query in a traditional search engine, the results that match the query words, they get weighted and ranked largely based on these network of links. And so it's more complicated than that, but that's the general idea. So a way to think about this is that it's like the search results. And web pages aren't created by themselves. People create them. So in a sense, people are weighting and voting on other web pages. So it is a bit of a social ranking algorithm if you think about it like that. So that's how search has been. That's the very powerful technique that made kind of Google really successful, I think, early on, among other things. And it's probably similar to what other companies are using too. Now let's think about search in the social space. So if you're spending time working in this area, social search, or that concept, is starting to become more popular. But this is kind of a busy graph. But the main thing I want to emphasize here is that the information that is collected around how people search around web pages has really exploded. You can look at these two nodes that are people. We're collecting information, or not us here, but in general, other people are collecting information around who visits which web pages, who comments on which web pages, which pages have been liked or +1, which pages have had video-rich media on them, have been played, and all that information now can be used to give better search results. And so we have a whole group of new search engines coming out, or new ways of finding information. A lot of them are question and answer sites. A lot of them are creating customized search pages using humans that are doing this, and so Mahalo's doing that. There's some that are very industry focused, like Quora, doing in the technology space in Silicon Valley, kind of started out of there. Cha-Cha, a human-driven engine. And so all these things, moving from the kind of what I would say indirect search method that we see in the previous slide on PageRank, where you would create hyperlinks and that would impact the search. You can go and you can like pages or vote and rank pages. And so this information in general would trump some of those hyperlink graphs that are out there. So it's an extremely, I think, a dynamic environment now in this space, and we'll see what happens in the coming months. So we talked about what kinds of social interactions happen, how data is collected, and I've been mentioning this concept of the networks and describing that. So why are these important? We talked a little bit about search, but let's go a little bit deeper into why it's important. So one of the books that really got me interested in this and was given to me by a good friend was Duncan Watt's book from 1999 about his dissertation work, Small Worlds, Dynamics of Networks Between Order and Randomness. I think it's a really great book to launch yourself into this topic. And let me kind of give a background into one of the main ideas that comes out of this book, so how they're connected in some relationship. So if you're familiar with the Kevin Bacon game, let's use that example. So this purple node is Kevin Bacon, and the question is, how is Kevin Bacon related to other actors in the film industry based on what films they've been in together? So what we would do is, in a sense, is that the nodes that are directly next to Kevin Bacon are colored based on their distance from him, so they get a lighter shade of purple. So the ones that are near him are kind of a purple, and they get lighter all the way till we get to the node at the bottom left, which is white. And so that, in a sense, represents the distance that each node is away from Kevin Bacon. So what Duncan Watts is doing in this book is to understand why some networks that are measured in nature, including social and other types of networks, have a very interesting structure. And one of the things he found was that if you do some random rewiring in these between these two nodes, I'd call this some kind of random edge that appears there. You see what happens is that the node that used to be white is now one step closer to Kevin Bacon. So we just changed the paths that we would find in this small graph. And so I'll just replay that again. So we make that connection, and now that white node has become a little bit closer to Kevin Bacon. And one way to think about this is what we see in nature. So people have done this experiment. So Stanley Milgram, I think in late 40s or 50s, did this, and he was sort of popularized the concept around 6 degrees, so people are connected to each other everybody in the world is connected to each other by a few number of interpersonal relationships. The Paul Erdos number around how many and so these key nodes, these people like Kevin Bacon who connect so many other actors in the film industry, or Erdos who connect so many mathematicians, they are usually called influencers. They're somehow important to the structure of the network in that they bridge different communities. Granovetter calls he calls something similar to this same concept weak ties. So a weak tie would be, a connection that you have with somebody that you'd kind of say it's weak in terms of you don't know them great, but they are in a very different community. And if you wanted to reach out to that community, you know somebody there. Maybe he's not your best friend, but you know that you can call in and have access to that community. And the other point that came from Duncan Watt's book is that we find these networks in lots of places. And after his book came out, there was a huge growth of the kind of we did some work a while ago to look at different social networks. And so these are 3 different connections, graphs for different social network communities. These are connections by friends, and they're very small here, but you can see kind of little red numbers on the edges which denote how many communications were measured between people. And so I wanted to use this to kind of highlight 2 points. One is that when you go and you measure these networks in the real world, they're very different. The structure changes dramatically from one community to another. So on the top left, we have 2 distinct cliques, is what we call them, in graphs and networks. There are 2 groups of people who share very few connections between each other. In fact, there's only 3 edges that connect them to this one person. We have on the top right 4 other people, and there is a very interesting kind of network structure if we measure that with different metrics. But one thing that we noticed when we started measuring these digital networks is that there's a concern about how important are all these links. So take, for example, this big graph in the upper right. This one person is connected with tons of people. Take this to this example and think about it in terms of Facebook. You have probably, I'm sure you have thousands and thousands of friends, but you're not speaking with those people on a daily basis. So a huge portion of your friends' network is not really important to you. You might call them acquaintances, or you might call them people that you don't even really know, but they sent you a request and you felt bad. So what do we do if we're going to be measuring networks and we want to use the network? And so that was back in probably like 2007 that we started looking at this work. And when we ended up getting this publication in the middle here, there was a couple of other publications that came out in a very similar space. And I think they're all doing the same thing. So the top one is around Twitter and looking at how Twitter networks, what they look like when you really dig into them. So they try to use a measure of how relevant were different edges that were defined by Twitter followers and followees, and found that those networks were very different when you started looking at who do people actually reply to and read. The graph at the bottom was done, I was going to say the people at the top are from HP Research, I believe. The people at the bottom are from Arizona State University, doing lots of really interesting work. And we have social network data. We want to understand what decisions do we make when we create those networks. How do those impact the end structures that we analyze? And how does that impact the types of things we learn, like recommendation algorithms or search algorithms? So I think this topic is really interesting to think about, and so I'm going to go into a little bit of detail about the work that we did, but I think it's important to have some understanding of this, and you can take this away even to your own personal networks and think about it. So the first thing we see here is social network. Each node is a person, and the number on the nodes represent the number of communications that occur between people. Now, one thing you'll notice about this network is that there's no nodes that are kind of hanging around the peripheral, and that's other. And so there's some really good work in sociology. I'm going to talk a little bit about sociology later, but a lot of the work that we're doing with social network analysis was done 2, 3, 4 decades ago in the social science space. So this work said that when you have two people connected, you can believe that their connection is more meaningful, it's more important, if they're also connected each to the same third person. And so that we took that concept and applied it to the digital space here. So we only keep nodes that are connected between two people if there's also a third person to communicate or to validate that connection. We then count how many communications occur between each person. And then what we can do, because we have that count of communications, we can remove edges based on those contacts we're collaborated with for the last month. You probably aren't going to be missing anybody, significantly important. That's the notion here, is that we want to say, who are the people that are important to us based on the actual behaviors that we've done, the people we've actually contacted and been in touch with. And then after we do that removing of edges based on those weights, those contacts, then we can look back and we can drop nodes that aren't part of these triads again. And so in that way we change the structure of the graph, and we're hopefully driving towards something that is more meaningful in terms of these are real social relationships. So this is the most complicated I'll get on this topic, this graph. And the thing I want to highlight here is that on the left-hand side, this is a rank, and it's a rank of a graph metric called transitivity. And the things at the top, so things at the bottom of the graph, they lack a lot of rich structure. Now, our graphs are all composed of triads, and so when we talk about the transitivity, we're talking about things that are already parts of triangles, but they're also very different types of structures. So, and the reason we want to do this is because we could think about it this way. Things that have rich structure are maybe more healthier in the social space. So there's research we'll talk about in a little bit later in that line too. So these were 10 different online communities that we measured, and we measured the transitivity, and we applied our contact cutoff metric. And so moving from left to right, each vertical section here represents increasing the contacts that we require for those edges to be part of our graph. And then what we can see increase the number of required contacts. And so what does that mean? If we look at the top community, B, if we look and say, we ask ourselves this question, which communities are the healthiest here? Well, B is the healthiest, but after we change the cutoff, now B all of a sudden becomes the fourth healthiest. Let's look at community G. We start measuring it by just counting all their relationships and contacts, and he is ranked number 4. But if we require one contact between members, all of a sudden G becomes number 9. So if we're using this, let's say that this is these are communities in a behavioral or mental health social network, so people coming together in communities to help each other overcome mental health issues. And we want to say, okay, which communities lack key network structure that we might think they're at risk of maybe relapsing or not helping each other in the community. Well, G all of a sudden goes from being number 4 to maybe becoming number 9, a community that we want to focus on. If we change the cutoff a little bit more, it jumps up to number 6. So this variation between values is really important in terms of trying to use social network, especially from digital spaces, to drive things like identifying at-risk people, at-risk communities. And that's what we were exploring in this paper, is how do we change the way that we construct networks, and how does that impact based on what I call the design decisions that we're making. And those other papers, especially the group from Arizona, is doing something very similar. And I'll also make another note on this paper. You'll notice by Chaudhry, one of the co-authors is Duncan Watts, the author of the book that I had mentioned earlier. Okay, so we're going to start talking about some of the I was fortunate enough back in 2007 to attend a conference or a small workshop at Harvard around computational social science. And so for this first reference here that was a paper in Science in February 2009, I was very lucky to meet some of these guys, just brilliant people working in the space, mostly from the social sciences. And one of the things I learned going to that workshop was that this is an extremely exciting time in social sciences because they're moving from what they used to be able to do, which was collect self-report data, going and asking people who their connections were, who their key friends were, to understand human behavior. They now have just an amazing amount of data available through Facebook, through all kinds of social network places. But there's a lot of challenges. The challenges that I mentioned before around how do we construct value, or that in the social science space, when they would go and study behavior, like how do peer networks impact different kinds of like violent behavior or something, people would think about how do we collect data, how do we contact people, and now people are asking to do the same questions but using Facebook. So it's a very different type of data design that's being done, and it presents a lot of challenges for information scientists like myself who try to use this data but don't have years of social science training, and it presents challenges to social scientists who want to use that data but maybe don't understand the digital platforms, the IT things that could lead to what would be anomalous types of data that appear in there based on how people use it. Example for that is a social network that has certain technologies available to it that are available. So people have to consider those issues as well. So two of the authors who were in that group, Nicholas Christakis and James Fowler, have been doing some really cool work on understanding how diseases and how different behaviors can be studied in these new kinds of networks. And so one of the key things they've been doing for a couple of years now is that they digitized the Framingham Heart Study. So this was from Framingham, Massachusetts. It started in 1948 to look at heart disease. Around 5,000 people were enrolled. And then in 1971, they enrolled about 5,000 of the offspring of those people and their spouses. And so in this picture here, what the authors were doing is trying to understand how happiness spreads or how happiness is found in social networks. So they had what I would say is the traditional kind of data. So they had a data collected for studying heart disease. In that data, they asked people, who do we contact to find you in a few years? And people listed their friends, family, coworkers. They also had where people worked and where they lived. And so from that, the authors did some interesting things to build social networks indirectly. So based on their neighborhood, they could understand who were social network members based on their being neighbors as well as being coworkers, and then also family and friends that they listed. So it's an indirect way to get the social network data. And then they used the behavioral or the mental health questionnaires that were used in that study around how happy people are, and they put that into the network, and you can see that there's people, the yellow nodes are happy people, the blue nodes are sad people, and they drove some interesting results about how people at the peripheral tend to be more sad, and how people that are connected to other happy people tend to be more happy, and how the structure around those happy people. So this is really cool stuff that they're able to learn. They looked at doing this with smoking cessation, I believe, and obesity and some other things. Now they also did something in a similar vein with using Facebook data. So now they went from using the Framingham Heart Study to using data they collected from Facebook. And so they had 1,700 undergraduate Facebook members and their friends, and they actually looked at how smiley their faces were in the profile pictures. And they tried to do the exact same study, and they came to similar conclusions about the embeddedness of individuals in the network and how happy or sad they were. So this is a cool way to try to understand something using the existing data. And now, of course, they also had to make a lot of considerations around the data quality and how they process the data. It's not as simple as just grabbing your Facebook network and trying to understand it that way. So I'm going to move into some work that we did here and that I was involved in. And so this is a picture where every technologist come down and they make poster presentations, demos. There's food, music, and it's a pretty good time to go and meet people and to see what other kinds of cool work is being done here. It's one of, I think it's the nicest time of the year because it's also fall up here in New York. So in 2007 and 2009, the projects that I was involved with, we wanted to demonstrate the work that we were doing. And so in 2007, we did something cool with viral marketing. In 2009, we did something really interesting with social networking and collaboration. So in 2007, we said, at that time we were just trying to understand how viral marketing and social networks really work. And what we wanted to do is we wanted to conduct what was kind of a traditional viral marketing experiment. And so we asked people to basically try to bring their colleagues to our table so we could meet them. And how we did that was we wanted to leverage the hidden social networks that were in the communities here at the center. We created a whole bunch of cards, and we gave out 10 initial cards. And what we said on the cards was to say, hey, find us at the Tech Fest. We had some balloons attached to our table. Bring us this card, and you'll get a really cool gift. And then when they actually came and gave us the gift, we would give them 5 other cards, and we could say, hey, you can go and give these to your friends. You can pass on the gift to your friends now. You can, if they bring a card, they can also have a gift. And every time those cards moved, we had encoded the cards with some numbers, and we also collected the name of the person when they gave us the card. So we then had the whole card-to-person network of which cards to who that we could then analyze. And so we can see this on this next picture. So this is a graph of that experiment, and each white node is a person, and the yellow node arrows indicate the direction of cards moving. And so you can also see the green nodes in this network are the initial seeds that we put out. Notice in the top right, there's a few little small graphs that have a green node, but they never grew very far. So those cards died out. Some people pass them around, and then nobody passed them on further. But the big group in the middle is really, this whole population of people visited the table. There's over 600 people in less than 2 hours came, and probably that was, a half or a third of the whole population that was at the festival. So it was very successful in driving people to the table. We could also then look at this data from like an organizational perspective and understand some really cool things. We didn't actually use this to try to study anything about our organization. It was used just to kind of demonstrate these concepts. But what we did do was that we awarded, I think at the time it was a nice little prize to who we identified was being the most. And the reason that he was important was that you can't see it on this graph. You can see that he's very central. But if we color these nodes by the communities people belong to, he was at the center of the technical communities, like scientists, the trade community, and the consultant communities here. And so we did two things, demonstrated with this experiment how viral marketing and word of mouth is very powerful to bring people to our table. And then we also demonstrated that we can collect what is extremely valuable data. Okay, so...
Telecom, can you please mute your phone? Thank you.
All right. Well, I know there's probably boarding here.
So moving on to the next 2 years later, we wanted to do something similar, but at this time we were doing a lot of work looking at recommendation algorithms and other types of social media. So what we did was we wanted to try to capture networks directly through social media, so not by handing out cards. We wanted to see how we could develop a system that people would interact with like they were interacting with Twitter and other kinds of digital media. So we had roaming laptops that were sent around the festival, and we also enabled people to send emails through their BlackBerry. So lots of people had BlackBerries at the time, and we could have them send emails. They could also send emails from their desk. We had a very huge digital screen that showed a dashboard I'll show on the next page of a whole bunch of information, and we also had a web application that people could go back to their office and see it either after or before they went to the festival. And what we could do from this is we can learn a lot about the organization as well as about topics that people are looking at the festival. So in fact, I'll talk a little bit later about some of the social media tools that we have, but I wrote this up a while ago on our Edison's Desk blog that you can read some more there. So this is what the tool looked like. Hopefully it's clear to everybody. This was what people could see when they were at the festival and at their web application. I'm going to point out something at the top left. So what people would do is they would email or enter from one of our roaming laptops what cool things they had seen so far at the festival. So you can see at the very top here we have somebody, a person, had entered holographic data storage in GE Brain and Virtual World. So we know this person was from the CDS organization. We know what time they made that entry. This could have been from email or could have been from a roaming laptop or from their BlackBerry. And so what we did immediately is we said, hey, you should check out the organization ITMS. So each organization had a group of tables. And we also said you may also like solar cells. So we're giving them a recommendation about where they should go in terms of a group of tables they might be interested in, as well as specific technologies. So we did that for everybody. And so when they would enter data into the system, we'd give them this immediate recommendation. To help drive kind of interest here, we plotted some trend graphs about what was trending, what was hot, and then showed a tag cloud of what technologies were being entered. But the real key, two things from a network social media aspect were these term networks down here. These related to the co-occurring terms that people are entering from what technologies they liked, and then the organizational network. And it's these networks that were created by social media is what drove the recommendations. So when we first started this system, and I think anybody who's worked in social media will know, is that when you have no users, you have no data, and it's very hard to get really good value here. And so what we had to do is we actually had to seed the system a bit. We had to have people go and without, actually trying to get recommendations, they had to start entering things that they thought were interesting and useful. That created some interesting relationships. The more people entered data, the better I think the better the recommendations got. And so this was a pretty cool tool. A lot of people had fun looking at it. And well after the festival was finished, we left the website up and people are still going back and entering information and looking at it. So, so far, we have about 5 or 10 more minutes left. And we've looked at friending and heart data. We've looked at Facebook. I talked a little bit about social network data. And we talked about the Tech Fest. And so people who work in the space might be wondering, what about the web? So there's lots of really cool things that are being done with just web data. And so next we're going to look at some of those examples. And I'll just make the point that we're going to be looking at hyperlink networks, so how people link on the web. But the same principles that we talked about before and we'll talk about next apply to people networks and to thing networks that are created by different types of social media platforms. So one example is by a really brilliant young researcher, Jerry Leskovic, who I now believe is an assistant professor at Stanford. And he's been doing some cool work in network sciences. And one of those things, which I think is really illustrative of this space, is ask this kind of simple question about what blog should I read? So if you're going on the internet and reading websites and blogs, you quickly become inundated with where should I focus my attention? So his point was that a lot of these communities, newspapers, news media, blogs, they organize themselves into groups that talk about the same thing. So you don't need to sample every point in that group. You don't need to read every blog about a certain TV show. If you really want to keep yourself up to date, you need to read a select key number of blogs that cover all the different topics that you're interested in. If you pick those ones well, then you'll be able to sort of sample all the information at a given point in time. So using the number of posts a website makes, the number of inlinks it gets, so the links that people make to it, and the number of links it sends out, they were able to create a pretty effective tool, and it's still up on the link I have there where you can go read about this work and see some of their things. I think it was from data in 2006, that identifies which bloggers that you should check out. And it's all based on the network structure that's created by people using social media linking and with the understanding, the assumption that these communities are identified by their key influencers and connectors. And so this was kind of a toy example, well, not really a toy example, but example about reading blogs. But they use the same technique to try to understand outbreak detection in complex networks. So like contaminants in waterways, disease spreading across human networks, things like that. So the concept is very powerful to take to other domains. When we read that paper, I thought that was super cool. And so what we did at the time was we wanted to say, okay, we don't want to do all the data collection work that they did by crawling tons of web pages and collecting all that data. I already know that there's a lot of open source information out there. How can I get at some kind of similar result in a very simple fashion using open source, using the web itself, the social media data itself? So we used Technorati at the time. We were able to get some special access to that tool, and we downloaded all the top blogs that it reported on there, so a huge sample. We then used their in-link service and gathered all the direct links between all the blogs, and then we used some out-of-the-box community detection algorithms and came up with a graph like this. So this was simplified just to show the concept here. So we have three kind of different communities. We have the community on the left, which is kind of more technical focused, things about search engines and gadgets there. Those are the nodes that are colored black, download squad. Then we have the things in the middle, the orange side. So these are a little bit more kind of the aggregate things, Gotham is consumerist. We have the O'Reilly blog. And then we have the top right, which are these yellow ones that have a lot more news things, Michelle Malkin, Hot Air. So these, you can look at those, and for the most part, they all kind of make sense as they belong to a community of similar sites. And you can notice that there are some key links between them. And so if we were going to pick which sites to read, just like in the Leskovic example in the previous one, this gives us a really nice idea or landscape of, say, okay, I might want to check out Michelle Malkin because she's kind of bridging two communities. Information that is appearing in one is likely to appear on her site as well. And this was all done very lightweight kind of system to go and sample this information. The next thing that we did is to say, okay, we can do that. We can have a big understanding about the general network. But what if we want to understand something about a specific topic? So we did this using a system that we built that we published a paper called Lightweight Information Retrieval, or I guess it was called Wisdom from Lightweight Information Retrieval. And this was, the idea here was that we wanted to say, I think this was in 2009, the salmonella outbreak in peanut butter was happening. And we had this idea to say, okay, where is that outbreak being talked about? And so we collected using open source search mostly tools, all the websites, all the blogs talking about that outbreak. We looked at who was linking to that, and then we also built some pretty, I think, novel models on how to estimate how many visitors each site got, so how popular were the sites. So we can look at this graph, and we can say something that I think is pretty cool. We can say, where does information flow on this topic? Who are the main people providing information and spreading information? And we can then see on the top left, or on the left side, we have a lot of law people. So as you expect, a disease outbreak, lawyers are getting involved for potential lawsuits. We have information, people disseminating information, Huffington Post, consumerists. We have quite a few news sites and quite a few specific places like Dallas-Fort Worth area. Some of these I'm not sure where the affiliates are located. So this is great, but why do I think it's exciting is that think of it from like the FDA's perspective. An outbreak is happening. They want to find the most effective way to reach the biggest population, the most relevant population. They can go and do something like this and quickly find where should they be trying to seed information, where is most of the discussion happen, who has kind of become the de facto person that's managing or hosting those conversations. That was the idea here. The next thing, this is a little animation that you can see moving. At the very top, you can see week -2. Week -1, it's going to go to 0 and +1 and then cycle back, is that since we can construct these networks, this could be social network. This is a very similar network I just showed you before. It's about websites talking about a certain topic. And since we're measuring that, we can also measure it over time and look at how information spreads. So this can happen with like a disease. We can look at how disease spreads in social networks. We can look at how information spreads. And we can make some predictions. We can say, is this going to spread to like a viral thing? Is it hitting some key nodes? Which sites are picking up? Which sites are likely to pick up? And so we can really start to understand how these networks evolve over time. And this is all made possible by, again, the social media collaboration and the ability to collect this kind of data. So a few final examples that I wanted to touch on. And so in the top left, I think probably one of the examples which really epitomizes the novel use of this data is around what Google did with the flu and just very recently with MRSA, the superbug tracking. And the idea that they have is that if you measure how people search in Google. You look for certain keywords that are associated to diseases or to treatments, that you can get a very fast and accurate estimate about the spread of that disease. And you can even drill down into very fine-grained localities into different places in the geography. Another example is that GE Healthcare has a consortium called MQuick, and that is doctors' offices that use some of the GE Healthcare software to manage their patient health records. They partnered with the CDC to do nightly uploads of anonymous data to the MQuick consortium, which then cleans and processes it, and I think sends it not nightly, maybe on a weekly or monthly basis to the CDC, so they could have very accurate tracking of the H1N1 flu virus. So instead of doing some of the traditional methods that the CDC was doing, they now have kind of very direct information because the doctors are collaborating through digital data by sharing information, pulling it together, and then enabling the country to be more aware and stop diseases before they spread faster. And then through the Eco-Imagination Initiative at General Electric, they've done two big efforts around trying to identify innovations for smart grid technologies as well as for Power Your Home. And so we're seeing these similar techniques or similar kinds of challenges in other places. Starbucks has their Starbucks ideas, and lots of companies are doing this. And it's really cool. They're asking users, people to submit ideas, having people go onto the websites, comment, give feedback, suggest other ideas, rate them, allowing those people to collaborate and filter what are some really good ideas for business models, for new ideas for clean energy, for grids, how to improve our homes. And then there's prizes being given out, people get seed money to start companies. And so I think this kind of thing is a really amazing and cool way to try to use these technologies and leverage all the innovative ideas that individuals have. So that wraps up the webinar for today. So just to kind of reiterate, social media and collaboration tools, they're generating a ton of interesting data. They create value both directly in terms of, and enables you to talk to your friends, any time of day through your phone, through different applications. And then those interactions create extremely valuable data that those sites and services can use to give you even more feedback, and it gives you even more benefit through that indirect collaboration. So thank you. And do you want to have questions now or go through? Okay, so we have a couple questions. I'm almost out of time. Okay, so one question is, what are the most influential blogs that Steve would recommend reading for computer scientists? That's a good question. I use Google News a lot to aggregate a lot of the science stuff. I read the New York Times, Economist a lot for understanding what big science things are happening, and I check out like Nature and science blogs a lot. IEEE has some interesting sites. I think going back to the social science or the social search, one of the really interesting sites is Quora.com. I hope I'm saying it right. Is that that started, I believe, in Silicon Valley, and this is really the power of these systems. So you have some really great people from like venture capital places in there, people working in startups and other small companies, and they're answering very technical questions. So if you have a question about like a machine learning technique, you can go to search on Quora and you'll find like really great answers. And I bet that you'd be surprised. I mean, if they don't say who they are, I bet you'd find them working at some really big name places. And so that would be a site I tend to use. And I don't know if this is meant for more computer science, like software questions, but Stack Overflow, of course, is a big forum for that. And then there's quite a few evangelists from different big computer science places that have really interesting blogs that I check out sort of infrequently. And then another question is, do I believe that everyone has the ability to be social, or are some people just weird that way? I think it's, I don't know, everybody has a different level of how comfortable they are being social. I think some people are more social in the digital spaces. They're more comfortable doing emails and instant messaging. I remember when I was an undergraduate, the IRC channels were huge, and so people were on those things all the time, trying to ask each other help for homework and stuff. That was a really kind of a weird thing because you had no connection at all with people. It was just like on a DOS command prompt, you're just and that's all you've got really. Now you have pictures of people, videos. You can check out all the kind of history, the personal profiles. But I think obviously being how social you are is a very personal kind of thing, and some people are more than others. It's just your comfort level, I guess. Okay, so I think we should stop there because we're out of time. So on this page, you see some places where you can interact with our social media from GE Global Research. Lots of different places. You can find places that people can apply if you're interested in careers. Okay, and so I think we'll conclude today. I'll just leave it on the side if you want to check out any of these links. I thank you for everybody attending and giving me the opportunity to share some of my thoughts around social media and collaboration. Thank you.